All right, welcome to another Ember Weekend. I'm Jonathan Jackson.
And I'm Chase McCarthy.
And we are Ember Weekend. We're talking about some newsy type things today. I think we have some corrections actually as well, but we're broadcasting out of a bunch of different places. I'm in Providence and you're in Round Rock.
Yep.
Cool. How was DC?
DC is pretty good. I got to walk around the city a lot more this time. So took the train to the airport. That was amazing. It's 11 minutes to go from the city to the airport. And I'm used to Austin times where that's an hour-long drive.
Yeah, that sounds rough. That sounds rough for sure. But yeah, I guess we're going to dive right in. This is episode 109. But first, a word from our sponsors.
Hello, I'm Corey.
And I'm Matt.
Matt and I started our consulting company 201 Created 5 years ago. We've been passionate about Ember and its community since we started and are proud to be able to sponsor Ember Weekend.
Our clients have included Fortune 50 companies and Y Combinator startups. If your team needs Ember training or advice or wants to learn how to make open source work for you, visit us at www.201-created.com or follow us on Twitter at 201-TWO_OH_ONE.
Thanks for listening and enjoy the podcast.
All right, so the first thing we're going to talk about is actually a set of corrections from last week's episode. So in 108, we incorrectly, and this is totally on me, we incorrectly said that the Ember HBS minifier was a Babel transform, but it's not a JS transform, which is obvious in hindsight. But I just saw the AST, the visitor pattern, and I was like, oh, well, this is just it's Babel, whatever, Babel. Blanket statement, it's Babel, but it's actually an HBS transform. So if you're interested in looking around at that, you can learn more by going and actually checking out the source code. Thanks, Tobias, for mentioning that.
And the second one we wanted to mention was the Glimmer Playground is not actually made by Netlify. It's I guess they're hosting it, but it was originally, it's a port that Tom Dale made from the Preact.js REPL, and they're just kind of, I guess, hosting it there.
Yeah, and it's interesting. The repo, we actually did search for it last week and we couldn't find it. And we should have just asked around, but we were trying to do some on-the-ground research and we couldn't find the repo. And that is because it is actually under Tom Dale's account. So it's Tomdale/Glimmer-REPL, not Glimmer-Playground. So that's partially why we couldn't figure it out. So yeah, if you want to check it out, you can check out the code. Although we've been warned that there's some, the code is still kind of WIP, but you can check it out at Tomdale/Glimmer-REPL.
All right, the first thing we're going to talk about is a blog post by Matthew Beal on his website, which is madhatted.com. And this one's from a little ways back. It's June 16th of this year. And it's about building a progressive web app with Ember.
Yeah, and I remember you doing a lot of Lighthouse work for, it's not benchmarking, Lighthouse scoring for Ember Weekend when we started doing the fast boot stuff. So this basically kind of is a lot of that same stuff, but it's definitely more granular. And I think ostensibly he goes through how to get a perfect score with some configuration and add-ons exclusively. You don't have to write any of your custom stuff and you can get 100% on the Lighthouse for the progressive web app section.
Yeah, and there's four, if you look at the thing, there's four little circles that are showing you your progressive web app score, your performance, accessibility, and best practices. I don't know if this one, I know some of them take into account things like whether your JPEGs are
compressed.
Yeah, they're compressed, but they load partially. I don't remember what it's called.
Yeah, so they want a viewport thing, and they also recommend that you use, I want to say it's WebP or something, some other format for images. And I looked into it for my client project, and it's supported in just the last few versions of Chrome. So it's this is true, but I can't actually do this unless, you know what I mean? The theoretical savings are big. They're very large, but I don't know. We use Image Optim at my client project to optimize to remove any artifacts that are unnecessary for the actual valid image.
Yeah, and so this thing, it's kind of a standard. A lot of people use this to see just kind of a quick gauge of how how you're doing. Are you absolutely terrible? Or are you doing pretty good? You're definitely, it's, up to you whether you want to take all of the advice, and there's no real need to try and get a perfect score of 100 on all of them. And probably you can kind of fake it out. One of the things that's in here is that you get dinged for having nothing happen if you're disconnected, for not showing a page. But maybe you don't want to render the entire page. Maybe you just want to render a splash page that says, hey, you're not connected. And, doing that through a service worker. And that's valid. That gives you the points back. But is that really the best user experience for your app? I don't know.
Yeah, it kind of depends, right? If you're a content-driven site, then you should display some content. But if you're I think all of these examples were actually outlined in a website called Shop 201 where you can buy stickers. And yeah, if you're not connected, you can't buy stickers. So like, what do you do in that situation? I think they did opt into a splash page, like you mentioned.
Yeah. And so what this kind of blog post goes in order of doing is basically starting out with they give an example of the Shop 201, but then they say, okay, now we're going to start with a brand new Ember app with just the welcome page, like do the initial scoring, which it didn't score very great. I mean, I think it was like 36 for progressive web app out of 100. And so there was a list of things to solve. And basically he goes through like how to install a few add-ons, and you get service worker, asset cache fallback, which gives it like the offline support. And then he's like, okay, here's what our score is now. Now let's do some fast boot work. And then after that, he installs Ember web app. And web app is cool because it does the whole manifest stuff so that somebody can like save it to their phone's like homepage is like as an app. And so that kind of does all that for you. And then he just deploys it to Heroku and, I think he gets 100 on that. And then the other ones are fairly good. They're all in the green. So, I mean, they're not perfect. There's some work to do. Obviously, this is just showing the welcome page. So it's not, your app's not just going to score very great on performance and accessibility for this. But it scores pretty good for performance. So
yeah, I mean it really is cool. And most of these add-ons we've talked about on previous episodes, including Ember Service Worker. I think that's Dockyard and Martin Schilstra working on that. And Ember Fast Boot, we've talked, oh my gosh, countless times on Ember Fast Boot. The Ember web app thing, that's actually kind of new to me. So yeah, it's just cool. It's cool that you see like the community providing solutions that are like, really difficult to do outside of like community-driven solutions, like actually making something server-side rendered that also has service worker, that, all of these things that you need to, be a good progressive web app. They're really easy to do here and really, really hard to do outside of our ecosystem. So that's cool. I like the way that this blog post flows. So I definitely recommend checking it out. I think that there is a blog post, or there will be a blog post about showing this similar style with a Glimmer app, which should be really cool too.
Yeah, for sure. Because like at the bottom of this blog post, there's a whole section of, how do you deploy this to Heroku? And I think that would be different for the Glimmer app because, here you get to use like the Fast Boot app server and, there's the Ember build pack. So you kind of get a lot of stuff for free. So I'd like to see the difference between deploying a Glimmer app.
And then I want to talk about new news on the Ember RFC 176, which is the new modules.
Yeah, so if you're used to the Ember CLI shims, which was like, rather than just like pulling things off of the top level Ember object, you import things from like Ember-array/utils or something. Like, you go down and you get the things directly off of something they exist on, or something that they're exported to. That was like kind of going to be useful for tree shaking for various reasons. If you just start pulling things off the globals, there's no way that they can do tree shaking. So this was something that was started a long time ago, and there were shims for it. A lot of people use them. I mean, I've just recently been working on a project where we've translated to those shims. Those are now basically deprecated. I don't know if they're officially deprecated, but like with this being around, I definitely wouldn't use them because you're better off just sticking with the old stuff and then doing the work one time. Because the new way is to use the scoped packages, right? So like at Ember. So rather than doing Ember.a, you would say import a, like, brackets a from at Ember/array. So it's got a different path now. Like, so before you were just pulling off a global, now you're actually getting it off of this import. And if you already translated over to the shims style, which is the import brackets a from Ember-array/utils, they can translate that too. So that's good. You're not completely like hosed on that. But I don't know the actual reasons for going this route, but definitely it looks like it has something to do with the Ember now being like an actual NPM package rather than a Bower package that can take advantage of all the scope modules and stuff. So basically, the reason why there's a specific repo we're kind of talking about here, which is this JSON data that exists for that, because there's a whole bunch of mappings to go from one to the other. Actually, there's two things it can come from, right? It can go from the global version, or it can go from the shims style. That's used in like at least 3 different node modules right now. One of them being a code mod that actually translates it for you, which is great. The other one is there's a linter rule that's called no old shims. So if you use, it's like the Ember plugin for ESLint, you can turn this on. This is kind of a whip. It's still got a little wrench on it saying it's being worked on. But the idea is that it will fail if you're using one of the old shim style imports. Right.
Yeah. This is a lot of really cool stuff. The history here is a little complex, but I think they're making solid progress here, which is really cool.
Yeah. And the really cool thing is that if code mods didn't exist, they probably wouldn't be able to make the change, right? Because when the shims style came out, you had to do that manually. It was kind of like, you either kind of like, as you were adding new files, you were changing them, and then at some point you'd get around to the old ones because they both worked. The whole time you're doing it, you're basically saying, I'm preparing for the future. I'm predicting that Ember is going to have this feature in like a year. And it turns out we were wrong. Like it wasn't there. But the good thing is that it really only changes like one line at the top of the files for each one. And so, the idea that there's code mods that can just go in and fix it all for you now is just amazing, because you don't really have to pay the price for it. And if the code mods didn't exist, they probably would have just had to stick with shims or something, or the old style, because it's a lot of manual work to go in and change each of your files. And especially with the ESLinting rules being able to tell you like, hey, this one's wrong. You can fix this one like a one-off thing. But hopefully the code mod can just fix all of them.
Yeah, code mod is really cool. It's very interesting too. That's a whole podcast could be written about that sort of thing. So.
Oh, yeah.
Anyways, yeah, so check this out. We'll link to the new repo, the code mod, and all the other stuff. And then we wanted to mention a blog post by Jake Ferris called "The Risk You Take When You Use Ember Computed oneWay." I guess that is kind of clickbaity. Is that a clickbaity link title?
No, it should have been 5 things you didn't think about when you used Ember Computed oneWay.
That's great. Yeah, so in this blog post, Jake takes us through a lot of the computeds that Ember offers, which is a good refresher, and then also kind of explains more in depth the one-way one, which I think can trip up a lot of people.
Yeah, I mean, he actually presents a really good way to think about it, and he does it by kind of walking you through the standard ones, the ones that are kind of obvious, the ones that probably are used most often, like computed and alias. And he says, here's what computed does. We all know what, well, most people know what computed does. And there's all these other macros that get attached to it. One of them being alias, which is great because it can kind of eliminate the ability or the need to have to say like user.profile.firstname, and you can just say first name or user first name or something on a top level thing. But the alias is bidirectional. Like, so if you set it, it will set the thing at the lowest level. And if you get it and that one is updated, it'll get the newest one. So it's bound together. And then he says basically read only is very similar, but you can't set. So it's designed to be like, I want to show some data, but I'm never going to set it from this place. And I want to actually throw an error if I set, because that's invalid. And oneWay is this weird thing that happens where, to me, it feels a lot like when you have a computed and it's just a regular computed Git, and you do a set on it, and it would overwrite it, and you'd have some weird bug where you're like, why is this computed no longer working? And you're like, oh, because there's one other place we're setting it. We don't have a setter on the computed, so we're actually overwriting the setter. That's what oneWay feels like to me. And it basically can trip you up because it's for when it first gets set up, it acts just like a read-only or an alias. It's bound to the thing that's under, that it's pointing to. But then as soon as you set it, it breaks the binding and now just sets it right there. And now that's the only value it has, and it never gets reset up. And what he was actually saying in this post was that's sometimes can trip you up, but it's really useful in forms. I don't ever use it that way, but I actually stay away from oneWay. But I can see how that would be useful to basically say, I want to initially populate the form with a value off of something, but when the user edits it, I don't want it to manipulate the one. I want it to just set it in the input, and at some point I'll pull it off. Yeah, and I think you and I have talked about this pattern before, where we end up using proxy objects for forms usually, or what is the other, the Elixir inspired? Oh, like change set, which is or we use Ember change set. Yeah. And the reason why to me oneWay is a little confusing is that when you look at the code, I mean, if you know what oneWay does, you're fine. But if it's kind of iffy in your head what oneWay does, oneWay looks like it's bound to something like user.profile.firstname. And then when you first initially get it, it is user profile first name. But then the user edits something, and then now you look at user profile first name, and it's not the thing that you just edited it to. And then all of a sudden it's broken. It doesn't really. It looks like a bug, and even though it has a very specific use case. So I don't know. The blog post goes into a lot of detail for it. I like the way it walks you through the most simple one all the way to the weird one, and then says why it even exists, because obviously there's a need for it, or it wouldn't be an Ember. And so it's a good blog post. So you should definitely check it out. It'll clear up kind of. I think it organizes some of the things in your head about how they're related. Yeah, definitely. So make sure to check it out. We'll have a link in the show notes. All right, and thanks for listening to the end. If you would like to follow along with Ember Weekend stuff, you can do so at Ember Weekend on Twitter, all one word, or you can find us on iTunes at Ember Weekend.
And we also have a Slack channel, a topic, Ember Weekend. You can talk to us there. We've actually had some recent discussions with Locks that if you are within the sweet spot listening to this, you could probably go back and actually scroll up to the history, but history is limited on the Ember.js community Slack. And there's more details about some of the shim stuff that we talked about. But yeah, definitely reach out. We really love to have conversations and talk back and forth about some of the stuff we talk about here. So be sure to follow there as well. And yeah, that's it. I'm Jonathan Jackson.
And I'm Chase McCarthy.
And we'll see you next week.